Hello, do you remember? I do. Now I'm going to go out of town tomorrow and I won't be doing a video for a little while, but a comedy gem that was maybe um, not too popular, but from a cartoon that was a part of pop culture that seemed like it was aimed at children, but or was advertised that way, but it had too much adult humor and pop culture references and satire to be a kid show, but more I'd say a cartoon for all ages. And in 1992, they released a straight-to-video movie called Tiny Toon Adventures: How I Spent My Vacation, and that's about the wacky, zany adventures of some of the main characters. And it starts out with a musical number. We are waiting for the clock to strike 3, where the characters are anticipating summer and demonstrating what they plan to be doing over the summer. Plucky ends up going on the road trip from hell, which is like the vacation only it makes it seem like a stroll through the park with ice cream. And the soundtrack is kind of a soundtrack of classical instrumental music and a few original songs. When we cut to the first day of summer, we hear humor-esque dun 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 dun, where they're talking about what they're going to do for vacation, and turns out Plucky's Hampton's family is going on a road trip to Happy World Land, a definite parody and satire of theme parks. And that was definitely of interest to me. This was about 1994 when I started when I became a diehard fan of the show. I was a huge Tiny Toon Adventures fan too, and this was about set at summer vacation, but it actually came out in March. But while the show was still on the air, and the Hamptons' parents are Wade Pig and Winnie Pig, played by Jonathan Winters, and that lady with the kind of funny voice who plays the secretary on Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and through a funny series of slapstick where Plucky tries to chase him down, but he keeps getting hit by the car. They take sympathy and decide to let him come, but he has no idea what he's in for. These pigs just seem like negligent minimalists who abuse not only Plucky but abuse themselves. There's a running gag that I didn't really care for much, is Buster Bunny always squirting Babs Bunny in the movie, and it starts out with the Morning Mood number from Peer Gynt that is a familiar tune. And he pulls a squirt gun out of a freezer and blasts her while she's laying in her idyllic chair. And they have a frantic chase where Buster always ends up squirting her, but she decides to open a dam or something and flood Acme Acres, but he still gets away on a surfboard, where we hear the Hawaii 5-0 theme, and Byron escapes from Elmira, even though she says, "We have skydiving lessons at 4." And they take refuge on a raft, and Byron accompanies them, and their vacation ends up being like a Huck Finn type odyssey journey. And then we see Shirley the Loon sing them in an hourglass, but can't help because of her summer job, or decides not to help. And Foulmouth, the downsized version of Awkward Langhorn, has been begging her to go to the movie. He's seen this one 100 times, and then Fifi's summer goal was to meet the hunky movie star Johnny Pugh, and she chases him, stalks him at Acme Hotel, which has caricatures of Jay Leno with a chin so huge he has to push it on a cart, and Roseanne Barr singing the Star Speckled Banner and crushing Fifi when she says, "It's not over till the fat lady sings." And in the entertainment lounge we see Arsenio Hall and I guess Johnny Carson and David Letterman. David Letterman makes a joke like, when I ordered room service, I was hoping they'd bring up another room. And then she finds him outside the hotel, and he has Raphael's voice in a leather jacket, and at best, he's not that nice. He won't sign her autograph, and she bursts out and cries, but he gives her a tissue and says he can help her carry her stuff, all her stuff. And then we see, also they bring Uncle Stinky on the trip, which was this giant pig that snorted all the time and sweated and had flies, buzzing around him. And it's sort of a suspension of disbelief. They're how they get to Happy World Land. They end up in completely random places. Like, they seem to be driving through the Egyptian desert with a pyramid with Spielberg's lifeless, and another imitatable thing that interested me, that I thought was pretty interesting, we did, was they end up in a tunnel that's 7 miles, and they hold their breath to make a wish, but Plucky doesn't make it and ends up being thrown out can't hold his breath, and the pressure tosses him out the back of the seat, and he catches up with them, but they all make it for the 7 miles, and when they let out the breath, it causes everything to fly in the air, including them, and then it lands all on top of everything, but is end up being put back together. And they said they wish to be a happy, loving family forever and ever, and Plucky wished to be in Happy World Land. And then we cut to Buster and Babs on their river trip, and we hear old folks at home playing, and we see a possum kid playing a banjo, and Buster seems to be in an idealistic, kind of preachy, laid-back mood. He says, "Don't be so judgmental. Music is the universal language." But they go over a waterfall, and Superman saves them, only to dump them when he says, "This is our story. Get your own video. It's your call." And Babs ends up in the bottom of a river where Little Mermaid characters are singing a parody of Under the Sea, and they rescue her, bring her to the shore, and Buster revives her. But creepy possum folks show up, and they actually want to make dinner out of them, but Buster doesn't catch on to that. He just being, singing the best in them. And he communes with the possum kid, and they do a pretty impressive number called Dueling Banjos, where Buster uses his tongue like a banjo, and it sounds like the theme. And Babs is the one that has to thwart their plan to, make them dinner. And Buster talks about how they're salt of the earth folks, and seems to connect with them, relate to them, and Babs ties them up in a log and rolls them down the hill, and they escape. And Elmira was trying to put suntan lotion on Furball on the beach. And I remember next we see Hampton and the crew going through a drive-thru and having a disgusting sandwich of mayo and cream cheese. And they only get 5 waters, but Plucky finds immature radioactive samurai slugs, which is referenced multiple times in the show. Of course, it's a parody of TMNT, but Plucky gets car sick reading comics, and it's kind of interesting, the animation and the cartoonish roadside where they go up these big mounds and then drop, and bigger mound and drop. It just goes completely down, not in an incline or decline or anything, but then the road flattens out, and Plucky tries to get what he can, but Hampton spews on the comics. And next we hear a instrumental of the Nutcracker Suite, and Babs is singing a song to the harmony of it, and they end up at this, elegant mansion, southern mansion, but they open the door, and these pretty frightening alligator ladies open the door, and they're desperate for a hubby, and they take Buster, and they've got this Papa has like that, seems like a refined southern gent with that southern drawl. Alligator's like, Buster's like, "I can't marry all 3 of them, that's bigamy," and they were fighting and pulling each other's tails, fighting for his attention for his affection, his hand in marriage, and apparently he was a minister. He was performing a wedding ceremony, and Babs, it was the 4th of July, she went in the shed and found fireworks where they take a picture in the gazebo, and she tricks them by lighting it on fire, and Buster jumps out, and it appears the gazebo shoots up in the air, and they explode. Really dark, huh? But see again later. Then they finally get in their boat, and on the raft. And the next day, we cut to Elmira going to a drive-in zoo, and she escapes, and her frighteningly, harmfully demonstrative love of animals. She finds some young zebra and gazelle and lion, and she's reading a book about about animals in the jungle, and she shows that she's the most feared predator in the jungle. Then they finally go to the king of the jungle, take this up with the king of the jungle, and he comes up vicious and roars at her, but she overpowers him and gives him a haircut, and he, like Bart Simpson, and they both yell and run away and steal a car and run into Hampton and his family and Plucky. Then they straighten out the spin, of course. And they finally stop at a rest stop, and Plucky tries to get a drink, but slams the door right on him. And when he's like, "If you drink that much, we'll be stopping again in no time." And then it's pretty interesting when they're looking at the map when the weather's turning and getting ominous, and Plucky predicts they'll be there April of 2021. It's interesting how far in the future he predicted, but then April of 2021 has come and gone. Then there's a really funny kind of side plot where they pick up a hitchhiker because they don't see that the creepy shadiness, the psychotic look in his face. They were just, when he was just concerned because they nearly ran him over. He said he looks white as a sheet with fear, and the lightning flashes in his eyes, but only Plucky can see the maniacal, psychotic, scary, creepy look. And the radio news comes on, and describes him perfectly, and say he escaped from a maximum security prison. He's a parody of Jason Voorhees. And he has a chainsaw, and Plucky tries to write down the number, but when he turns it off and says, "Honestly, there's so much sensationalism in the media these days." And apparently he has an aversion to pork, and any pig product will cause him to go screaming off the deep end. But it turns out he's also hates duck too. And he goes off the deep end, goes berserk, and chases Plucky around with his chainsaw, spouting off all kinds of maniacal stuff. And they just say, "Stop roughhousing in the car." And he tries to send a note, but it gets blown away the next day when Foulmouth finally finds Shirley, and they agree to go to a movie where it was a parody of arachnophobia, and there's a lot of gags in there, like we see Cher and Jack Nicholson and Pee Wee Herman, Paul Rubens, and a literal anthropomorphic cigarette who has to leave the theater because no smoking was allowed. And and Foulmouth has seen this like 1,000 times, and the theater can't stand him. It's just a nightmare. Plus he's, abrasive and foul-mouthed. And Fifi finally sees Johnny Pugh again, but she won't give her the time of day, but she is happy to sign the autograph of this gorgeous pink skunk that smells really good, and she gets really fed up and just pissed, and she throws him out of the theater, and the whole theater throws Foulmouth literally onto the screen, where even the actors fight with him, and they both get thrown out of the theater, and Foulmouth ends up right in the hands of Elmira, and she takes him home as her, any animal, it's their worst nightmare for Elmira to be their owner. And then we see it September, that's kind of interesting, and, really curious to me how the calendar turned by Sweetie to September, and we see it, and it was September. I don't remember school starting any later it seemed to usually start between the 2nd and the 5th of September, but a couple times on the 7th and 8th, and that seemed unusual. But they still hadn't made it to Happy World End, and they were still on their vacation, and things were kind of ominous there. And they end up on a steamboat, which has a pretty shady, kind of creepy Toad as the boatmaster, and they're telling jokes like Babs is, imitating Jessica Rabbit, and CCR rolling down the river, and Buster finally squirts her. And he's being a straight man there, and they turn the lights on. And it turns out that it's the creepy possum family and the alligators and more, and it's a pretty good climactic action sequence there where they're chase after them, and Babs is like, "Where's Superman when you need him?" And Byron decides to step up to the plate and become Superman. And there's one joke I even got when I was 7 years old, when they're soaring up in the air, and we see the same moon silhouette of E.T. and Elliot riding the bike, and they run into him, and he falls off his bike and perhaps into the river. And finally the day comes where they're about to arrive at Happy World End, and Mr. Hitcher was the hitchhiker's name. He gets flattened by a telephone pole, and it appears he dies, but he doesn't. And it was just us playing a knee slapper, is how Winnie and Hampton think he's such a nice young man, real straight arrow type. He's like, "If you ever knock me acres, come by and we can chew the fat," the little pig joke. I mean, I don't know, one, how they wouldn't notice that he was a mad psychopath, but two, what gave the impression that he was such a nice young man? And then, boy, this is a hoot here. I thought this is pretty neat as far as animation. It seemed like a pretty neat place, someone who was intrigued by Disneyland and Disney World and stuff. But it was definitely a parody of those kind of theme parks. Happy World Land, it had a giant parking lot. At the beginning, they have a young man take the picture. He seemed to be making fun of a mentally handicapped, or it just made him seem like a doofus beach bum guy, or a doofus California surfer airhead. And then this has kind of a catchy thing song. Happy World Land, where the fun doesn't stop at only $80 a pop. $80 a pop. That was, a real knee slapper at the time, the satire, but it's so funny. It's hilarious today. If people saw this today, it would really obliterate them. It'd be so embarrassing to them, because theme parks today do cost $80 a pop, a lot of them, and some cost $110 a pop and more. And it has 6 thrill rides and 400 gift shops. Oh my gosh. And they have rides like Happy Go Pukey, the Centrifuge, and the Gargle, where little boats go down this structure where there's just water, and hopefully they can hold their breath long enough. And the Bullet Train to Heck, which is like a rocket that shoots in air and then falls and crashes and explodes. And the Centrifuge, which spins around, Slap Happy Fun, where people get in a hand and it slaps to the ground. And the Centrifuge, which, it's like, has like little modules and it spins super fast, and when it opens up, we just see puke and like a shoe and a pink bow and stuff, and other articles of clothing, and the Stairway to Heaven. But Plucky's really hyper. He's like, "Let's stay a week. No, let's stay the whole month. I want to go on every." And before he said, "I want to go on every ride till I barf twice," but the family thought the road trip was the real vacation, and they're like, "Oh, that was fun. Now let's go home." And Plucky Wade was like, "Just think of what we'll have to look forward to the next trip." Yeah, Happy World Land, where all your dreams come true. But what's intriguing is that it's like the 2nd of September, and there's only a few days left to get home, and it seemed to take them 2.5 months to get there, but just a day or two to get back. And then there's kind of we cut back to Buster and Babs' predicament, and the possum kid rescues them with his tail, and turns out Buster was like, "See, I told you music was a universal language." But then there's a cart chase through a mine, like in the Temple of Doom, and Mr. Hitcher, that was, the psycho's name, and he chases them, trying to, chopped them up and saw them up with his chainsaw. And the cart takes them right by and through Happy World Land, actually, and they switch the tracks, and it looks like Mr. Hitcher falls into the ravine and dies. But another pretty intriguing and funny part that I didn't get when I was little is the track ends and they fall into a plot hole, which they go through. It has that rainbow look you see in the Tiny Toons logo, and the plot hole takes them to Acme Acres. And it's kind of, I'm not a cynic. I think a lot of kids like school. Buster and Baz were supposed to be 14, and I think most of the Tiny Toon characters were around there. And you know what's interesting is that Montana Max didn't have a vacation narrative. We didn't see what he did over the summer. Maybe he was making his Tesla prototype. As I've said before, it seems like Elon Musk is Montana Max grown up. But and they had no idea that they spent their whole vacation going down river and that school started. Then there's another kind of kind of like the opening song, the revival. We're sad, we're confessing that school is back in session. And we see all the characters, including kind of singing along, like one of the cats from the zoo is wearing a box. Like the box look was a joke that was created earlier in the movie, and apparently Mr. Hitcher was there and Chase and Plucky, and we see Elmira with Johnny Pugh, and Buster comes up and says, "And I am the champ." And he finally gets his comeuppance because Babs apparently opens a duct with a whole bunch of water that hits Buster Bunny, and she's like, "And now you are to stamp. And now you are to stamp." He got his comeuppance, I think. Yeah, like I said, I wasn't too very keen on that whole water fight gag in the show. Alright, you should watch it. You should really watch it if you haven't, or if you haven't in a long time. I highly recommend you watch it. It's really so funny and pretty relevant to today. Alright, I hope you like and subscribe. Bye.